scarcity to drive the price of oil and gas high, and have that be an adequate forcing function to move electric. So we have to figure out how to make electric cars themselves compelling without that economic forcing function of high gas prices. Thank you.
Very good. So Elon, welcome to the Motor City. And thanks for being here. Just a couple of Canadian boys talking fast cars and rockets. Couldn't be better. If you were going to launch two businesses, I'm guessing the natural place to start would probably not be rockets and cars.
Yeah. I think for sure, if you were to rank order companies to start and say what is likely to succeed, and what has the best risk-adjusted return, pretty sure starting a car company or rocket company would be at the bottom of the list.
So why cars and why space?
Well, because in the case of cars, it was very important for there to be an example of an electric car that was great. Like, there were no great electric cars. So people thought electric cars were like a golf cart. So they were slow, and didn't maneuver well, and had low range, or ugly, didn't have much functionality. And that's the picture that people had in their minds. And we had to show people that an electric car could be fast, sexy, handle well, long range, and be a great car. And that's what we did with the Tesla Roadster. So it's really important to sort of just break the mold, to address that misperception that one couldn't make a great electric car, and then to show that if you made an electric car with all those attributes, that lots of people would buy it. Because even after we made the car, then people said, well, yeah, you made this electric sports car, but nobody's to buy it. And then there's a way to show, yes, there is demand for it, and the same for the Model S. And then with our Model 3 down the road, showing that it's possible to build a compelling, long-range, mass-market electric car. That's, I think that's the third part of the strategy that I outlined with my first blog post about Tesla, now almost 10 years ago. So that's...
You had a few people doubting you. I mean, when you go back to...
Just a few.
Just a few people, right.
Here and there.
If we go back to 2008, you've had a couple of failed rocket launches. You've got a lot of Teslas sitting around in the garage. There are some issues there. In an instant, you receive funding from NASA, a huge contract from NASA for $1.5 billion. And then you also get funding for the car company. But you were at the bottom, correct? I mean, you were...
Yeah, I think this is important to emphasize, because if people look at, say, Tesla and SpaceX now, they sort of think, well, maybe they were always in a healthy position.
But it wasn't.
No, at the beginning, we were in really dire straits. No one would take us seriously, neither the rocket company or the car company. They just thought, well, he's sort of an eccentric rich guy, and he's going to lose all his money. They told me that several times. I mean, the most common joke I heard was, how do you make a small fortune in the car business or the rocket business? And the punchline is you start with a large one.
Right.
So it's like, I heard that joke so many times. I would just hit them with the punchline before they had a chance to hit.
And you nearly had a nervous breakdown around that. I mean, this was a personal...
I'm that close to a nervous breakdown. But I didn't think to myself, on the Sunday before Christmas in 2008, waking up on the Sunday morning thinking, I never thought I was someone who was capable of having a nervous breakdown, but this is about as close as I've ever come. Because things were really so dire. As you alluded to, earlier that year, after the first 3 rockets had failed, off our Falcon 1 vehicle, and I don't really allowed for enough money for 3 flights. So we had to desperately try to scrape together enough money for a 4th flight. And then with Tesla, the financing round fell apart in the summer of '08 because the whole financial markets were crashing and the enterprise were going bankrupt, and nobody wanted to give us money.
Not an ideal time to start a car company.
Definitely not. I mean, try to raise money for a startup car company that's making electric cars to boot, which is like that sounds like stupidity squared. Investors would be angry that we even asked them. like that we even asked them, they would be happy about that. And in fact, the only way we were able to raise money to keep Tesla going was is that most of the existing investors agreed to fund the company, and I put all the money that I had remaining into Tesla. So it still wasn't, it was amounted to about, in total about $40 million, 20 of which came from me. And I was tapped out, had to borrow money for it after that. And that tied us over into, for about six months, to May of 2009 when Daimler invested in Tesla. And that Daimler investment was really fundamental to the survival of Tesla. In fact, a lot of people think like somehow the government bailed us out or anything. That was actually not true. It was the Daimler investment that saved Tesla, not government funding. The first money we got from the government ever was in March of 2010, and that was after the crisis had passed.
And it wasn't your intention to even that this would be profitable. I mean, you thought it was actually going to fail at some point, right?
Well,
or you weren't sure it was going to be that successful.
At the start of Tesla, when it was just me and a few guys, I thought we maybe had a 10% chance of success.
Okay. How do you feel now?
Well, now I think we've got now I think this some degree of success is assured, but it's a question of magnitude. So does Tesla become sort of a niche car maker making maybe 100,000 cars a year or something like that, which is always super tiny? You know, that would be yeah, I mean, 0.1% of market share. I think that's the definition of a niche, should be 0.1%. You have to at least get past a decimal point to not be a niche. So that's one possible future.
100,000 or your stated goals of 500,000 by 2020.
Yeah, I think we'll probably aim to do more cars than that. I'm not necessarily by 2020 show the 500,000, but I think we'll probably continue past that.
You'll continue past the 500,000?
Yes.
Okay. Within which time? Within what kind of time frame?
Let's say, I don't know. I think we should be able to get to probably at least a few million cars in 10 years.
So by 2030?
Well, by 2025.
Oh, by 2025. Okay.
We could probably get to a few million cars a year. We're just going to keep driving our volume as high as we can, because our mission is fundamentally to transition the world to electric cars. So if we don't make a lot of electric cars, then we're not doing as much as we can. Now, I mean, that being said, I think most of the good that Tesla will accomplish is by sort of cutting a path through the jungle to show what can be done with electric cars. Like, so I think.
So you think that the industry as a whole will adopt a greater?
Yes, I think it's sort of the biggest impact that Tesla will have will be the degree to which we induce or cause other car companies to accelerate their plans for electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel they have that kind of passion right now?
It's a little bit, not much. You know, it's clearly not. It's not front and center.
Yeah. There were some vehicles shown at the Detroit show, for example, that are more in your segment than others.
Yeah, I think that's great. I hope to see a lot more of that. But until we start seeing serious numbers of electric vehicles, that it's hard to say that there's a ton of effort behind it. So I think we really.
Why is that?
Well, I think for a lot of people in the industry, it's not clear that the economics work for electric cars. I mean, it is a new technology architecture. And usually in the car industry, things don't change that much technologically. Relative to, say, consumer electronics, the pace of change is relatively slow. So I think for a lot of the car makers, they're uncertain about the demand for electric cars, and you get sort of a chicken and egg problem. Like if you don't know whether there'll be high demand for electric cars, then you don't want to make the investment to build them at scale, and so then you don't know, you never find out what the demand is. I mean, there are certainly some exceptions like Nissan, and that's what GM announced earlier. So, I mean, that all sounds good, but compared to the 100 million new cars and trucks made every year, we're still talking very, very tiny numbers.
So you're hoping that the industry really gets on board with the electrification plan, and that within that sweep, that Tesla then grows to these levels that you just said. Do the economics work for you currently?
Yeah, the economics do work for us. Yeah. I can't speak to our quarterly results before the quarterly results, but you know, we've been able to achieve a gross margin in the mid to high 20s. So that's a pretty good number. And we are negative cash flow because we are investing a lot in automation, in the Model X product line, just basically scaling up our production, building out our sales and service infrastructure, building out the supercharger network, and developing, doing the final tooling for the Model X, doing some advanced work on the Model 3. So we're spending a lot of money, but if we were to just sort of scale back our growth and just go for moderate increases in, say, the Model S customer base, we would be profitable by any measure. And I think decently so.
Some say, and the criticism out there is that every OEM adheres to GAAP accounting.
We do too.
With a call for some non-recurring items, but you leave out some costs that are permanent requirements of GAAP, such as stock option expenses. So under GAAP,
in there.
Okay, under GAAP, do you make money?
We don't make money under GAAP. We could make money under GAAP if we weren't growing and investing huge amounts of money. We certainly would be very profitable. Yeah.
Why not just release it the way everybody else releases it?
Well, we do. We are required to release GAAP financials.
Okay.
We do.
Okay. When it comes to that kind of scale, when you mention those numbers and that sort of scale, that's going to require enormous infrastructure, right? I mean, let's just look at, the retail network as one point, the service side of things.
Sure.
How do you get to those numbers with the current situation that you have now? And are you open to other retail possibilities? There's been a lot of talk of perhaps partnering up or at least forming your own network. That you consider adding franchise dealers to your distribution network when the volume gets high enough. How close are you to that?
Well, I think what I've said is that there's no question we need to establish the initial foundation with our own stores. So that's what we're going to do in every part of the world, and we have been doing in every part of the world. So we think before considering taking on any franchise dealers, we first need to establish a solid base with our own stores, and in any given region. So once we've done that, and we're able to catch up with our production rate, because Tesla's just been production limited for the last, since we came up with the Model S, we've been production limited. So most of our focus is actually on production growth as opposed to demand generation. And we're more than, in terms of our weekly rate, we doubled it year over year. It's very hard for a manufacturing company with a complex supply chain to grow by almost 100% in annualized production. So I think at some point we consider franchise dealers, but we want to first establish just a few stores of our own. And we struck various deals in places like, for example, in New York, say New York, where we the law now allows us to have up to 5 stores, and then beyond that, we're going to have to go to franchise dealers. We're okay with a compromise of that nature in other states, like Michigan, for example.
Right.
I think that's a pretty fair compromise, and and then we feel secure at the stage of the company. Because I don't want to be complacent about Tesla's success. And it is hard to sell electric cars. It's a lot more effort to sell than a gasoline car. There's a lot more education needed. And I just feel it's very important to have our destiny in our hands at the early stage. And then we can transition later if we can find the right partner. Because obviously we would only do this if we were sure that the customer would have a really good experience. There are certainly lots of examples of companies that have a mixed company-owned and franchise model. McDonald's being a key example.
Right. The auto industry is a little different, though, in that way.
Yeah.
Right. But are there?
Well, in the U.S., but,
right.
But in Europe, there's a mixture of company-owned and franchise.
Sure. But in the U.S., that's obviously not the case. Yeah. Are there levels that you need to get to, or what are the levels that you would need to get to in order to consider a partnership? Have you set those numbers in your mind?
It's hard to say exactly what the numbers are because we need to get our production rate to the point where we are demand limited, not production limited.
So what would that be?
I don't know. It sort of depends on when we saturate demand.
Okay.
We're currently at a point where we saturate demand. But it could be, I don't know, a few years or something.
That's your estimation, that it would be a few years.
Yeah, before we consider such a thing.
And you want a partnership more than you would want? I mean, what would your preferred model be on the retail side?
Well, I don't know what the preferred model will be. The big thing I'd be concerned about is making sure that customers have an awesome experience. And that the sort of sales experience and service experience is consistent and excellent. That's what we have to feel comfortable about. And then obviously, some of the car dealer groups have been fairly negative and attacking Tesla. We're also not going to work with them. Okay. Just to be clear.
Just to be clear, right.
If you're being a jerk to us, we're not going to be like, turn around and try to do a partnership later.
Right.
That would be crazy.
On the factory storefront, you're still at an impasse in many states, and new challenges are cropping up all the time. And last year, there were a string of compromises and actually court wins for Tesla. Do you need a national solution to allow direct sales?
I mean, that's one of the possible outcomes. It is a national solution.
Are you pursuing anything within
we're not
Congress
yet,
or federal courts?
No, we're not yet pursuing anything federally. Although there was a petition, a White House petition, I don't know if you know that, but
Yeah.
a petition to allow Tesla to sell direct nationally, which got 120,000 signatures or something. And we didn't create that, it was just like basically sort of Tesla fan base. So right now, we're really just having interaction on a state-by-state level. I'll be in Texas tomorrow.
You've called that, I mean, it's kind of the hardest nut for you to crack here, right?
Texas is a very important market for us, for sure. And
you lost in 13.
yes.
What's going to be different this time?
Well, I think in 13 we didn't have enough time to really talk to key legislators. And we did pass in the House.
Right.
But the bill never made it to the Senate.
Senate, right.
So I think I think it's mostly just about getting people comfortable, making sure there's a reasonable compromise here, and seeing what we can do. I do think, in the case of Texas particularly, direct sales is fundamental to the Texas ethos. I mean, Michael Dell, who started Dell Direct,
right,
in Texas. Okay, so like clearly. Clearly, Texas is pro-direct, and so the prohibition against direct sales, I think, is antithetical to what Texas is about. It's un-Texan, and so I think we've got a decent chance of figuring out some compromise legislation in Texas this year. I feel fairly optimistic about that. Again, we're not looking for wholesale repeal of the dealer laws. We're just saying, like, look, let us have a few stores here, and then we'll talk later.
You want the same thing in Michigan, obviously.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think like anything we're asking for is like crazy or unreasonable or like going to take food from people's mouths or Like we are a very tiny, situation. So
Right.
even if we got big, we'd still be like maybe a few percent of the market. So.
But if you get big in the direct sales method, I mean, if you go to an Apple store and there's a hot product, there are lines that are out the door. If you get hot in the Tesla market, I don't think car consumers want lines up the door, correct? So it doesn't.
True.
Right.
Yeah, people have come to expect that they can buy their car immediately, yeah, I mean, yeah, I suppose they don't want lines up the door. We don't have that many stores, it's really a pretty small number.
Let's get back to the business model. Do you need to start showing a profit?
Well, I think we will at some point need to start showing a profit.
When would that be?
When would that be, I guess? Probably when the Model 3 is in full production.
Which is when?
20, I mean, we feel pretty comfortable saying 2020, like at that, getting to that 500,000. I think when we're doing 500,000 cars a year, I think we should be profitable at that point, or
By 2020,
or we're doing something wrong. Yes.
Yeah, we start making some money.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there'll still be a lot of room for investing in future technology, but at that point, we should be at a reasonable scale where, despite investing in new technology, we're still profitable.
So, just to be clear, you're still on track for the 500,000 by 2020?
Yes.
Okay. How many Model S's did you sell last year?
I can't say the number because I've been front running the earnings call. But we're pretty happy with the number of cars that were produced and ordered. With Tesla, the metrics are a bit different because in all car business, sales and deliveries are the same thing. Because cars go to the dealer lots and then they get sold. But in the case of Tesla, and so that's a real understanding of the demand level. In the case of Tesla, since most of our cars are ordered in advance, the actual measure of demand is how many orders does Tesla have on the books. Because they're built to order, and it's a typical waiting time of anywhere from 1 to 4 months. So
you had said you wanted to sell 35,000 last year. That was the goal.
aspiration.
Did we come close?
Well, again, our aspiration was to deliver
Right.
35,000. And we actually changed that to 33. Because it's getting too difficult to get deliveries done at the end of the business breakdown. So our aspiration was to deliver 33,000 cars. We sold, in terms of orders for cars, far more than that.
Okay.
And then there's a question of how many cars were manufactured and how many cars were delivered. So those are the metrics that really are important. And we need to do a better job of educating media so they don't conflate gaps like sales, meaning deliveries, with actual demand. Because they'll think, deliveries went down, so that must mean fewer people wanted a new car. But actually, the reason deliveries went down is just that our manufacturing ramp was slower than we expected.
Well, because you don't report monthly sales and delivery numbers, the investors and media kind of guess all kinds of crazy methods and put out all kinds of bad information. So every OEM reports sales by market. Why not release the number like any other car company?
I think we probably will in the future, but I think once every 3 months or once every month there's not a huge difference. I'm not sure how that actually helps, really. It helps if you're in the press and you can write 3 times as many articles instead of 1.
You're educating the press today. So.
Yeah, so I'm sure, okay, I can see how that helps if you're a writer, but it's not like just up there how selling Tesla. And I think sometimes it's difficult to interpret these numbers because we will make cars in batches. So we'll make cars for 3 weeks. We'll just make cars for Asia, and we'll switch to cars for Europe, and we'll switch to cars for the US, and then those will get delivered in waves. And so people see huge differences in deliveries from 1 month to the next, and assume that somehow consumers are going through these wild gyrations in their interest in the car. It's actually got nothing to do with that. It's just when the boat left. Okay, so that's all. So I think right now, releasing things on a monthly basis would just get people really confused.
Are your U.S. sales rising? Or are your orders for U.S. cars rising?
Yes.
By how much?
So like, I give that to you. But I mean, I can't say that, over the course of last year, we saw a significant increase in demand for North American, a significant increase in North American demand, and a significant increase in demand in Europe. Things were a little weaker in China, but just because I think of some communications issues that we need to fix. Most importantly around charging, people have the misperception that charging is difficult in China, but actually at this point we feel we've solved all the charging issues. But we've got to work to correct that misperception. So that's it. So North America and Europe, excellent. Actually, Europe's surprisingly excellent. And then places like Hong Kong, actually really good. Australia, good. But then China was sort of unexpectedly weak in the fourth quarter. It's still, we have more than enough demand to make up for the reduced demand in China. And we'll fix the China issues, I think, and be in some pretty good shape relative to the
The Model X is now over 2 years late. What went wrong?
Well, I do have an issue with punctuality.
Or is there a kid that was low?
Yeah, late to class. It's just like, yeah, it's good. I think inherently optimistic, and I think some of that optimism leads to me thinking it could get done sooner than it can. So I'm trying to recalibrate a little bit. But at this point, I'm confident that the Model X is really going to be a phenomenal car.
When is it coming out?
This summer.
Okay, so for sure launch this summer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure this summer. We do want to be cautious with Model X and make sure that we've done a lot of validation testing to make sure, particularly the Falcon door works perfectly in all circumstances. So it's like rain, storms, sleet, hail, on a steep incline, all sorts of crazy circumstances. Because the door is fundamental, like no one's ever done, sort of double installing or a Falcon door. We think that it's sort of fundamental step change in utility for an SUV. It gives the SUV more utility than a minivan. And then because the center mass is down low with the back-to-back and the full pan, it has a better center, a lower CG than any. It is on the CG of a sports car, and the functionality of a minivan. It's good. This car is really good. And I do not say these things lightly. And I'm very self-critical of my own stuff, and I really think this is going to be something special.
Earlier this week at the Detroit show, Sergio Marchionne said that there needs to be more consolidation in the industry, mainly to cut the cost of developing products. The problem in the car business is just the cost of investments and how much it takes to invest in a platform, as you well know.
Yes.
You've had discussions with BMW. Did Mercedes talk to you before it sold its Tesla stake?
Yeah, actually, just a comment on the BMW stuff. That was really sort of weird because I have been in Germany and I made all kind of comments to one of the German magazines because they asked what am I doing in Germany besides getting this control and steering wheel. And I said, yeah, BMW invited me to stop by and we talked about various things. And that got blown up into Elon Musk announced his joint partnership with BMW. It's like, look, man, I was just passing through.
Ian?
He was passing through.
He was passing through.
It's just passing through. And then, so the media sort of built up this massive story, like,